Welcome, my friends, for another Monday afternoon in beautiful Woburn. And it's snowing again. Unbelievable, unbelievable. I just come down, it's a little slippery. How'd you get here? Was it slippery coming in here?
Wasn't too bad.
Wasn't too bad yet. Maybe when we're going home.
Correct.
That's my guest, that's a secret, so if you recognize him, don't yell out his name. All right, let's get to it because we've got a lot of business to talk about. The chairman of the school committee. First order of business, Mr. Grillo. Mr. Grillo sent an email over here to the station saying that I misunderstood, or I don't know what I'm talking about relative to Spence Farm parcel, relative to New Wyman School and all that kind of stuff. So therefore, I say to Mr. Grillo, I apologize for that if I did. It's not impossible that I misunderstood this situation. So I think what we'll do is we'll invite Mr. Grillo. I'm going to call him tomorrow, 781-934, and maybe next Monday or some following Monday, he can come in and sit down and represent the Wyman neighborhood group and tell us exactly what the Wyman neighborhood group is like to do on relative to those two schools. But like the chairman says, we're not even that far along. We're getting our ducks in a row, though.
Correct.
We're never going to get two schools out of them. Never. We're never going to get two schools.
Two schools out of
the two you're going to get rid of. You're going to get rid of two, right? The Herald and the Wyman.
Herald and Wyman.
You think
Bring them together.
There's a possibility you could get two individual schools to come back again? They're going to say Bill won.
No, I would think it would be strictly one to be looking to combine the two.
All right. So
had no indication
otherwise.
Let me put that one.
All right, let's go. Last week, the mayor appropriated $2.7 million, and then come along and somebody suggested maybe we could have a citywide truck traffic study. And he said that if there's any money left after he spends the $2.7 million, then he'd go for a truck study. Scott's always wanted to keep his fingers right on the 10-cent pieces. He watches all that money. If there's any money left, he'll have a citywide truck survey. In my opinion, truck survey is not going to do it. Unfortunately, we're in one of these communities that is old, back in 1600s, and industrial buildings were built here, there, and everywhere. It isn't as though, like in California, all the industry's out over here and the residences over here. So you can drive from a factory in the south end through the neighborhoods, get to North Woburn. You know, you could be all around all day. So I don't know whether a truck traffic study would solve any problems.
This is all set well before zoning was even a phrase that was used.
That's one of the problems. Yep. The city's going to have that problem. That's why over the past year or so, they've had all these problems trying to resolve some of the zoning issues, like the assisted living over in East Woburn, because half the lots industrial, half the lots, you know what I mean? So they tried to straighten that out a lot, but they have a very difficult chance. And since the city is 90% built, I would think that that's just the way it is in an old city. Council gives approval to the Coffee Cup Bakery Company to move down a micro drive, which is down off of Holden Street, down the Winchester line. The Coffee Cup Bakery was started in 1940 in Vermont, and all they're going to do down there is move the stuff from their bakery in Vermont down to Woburn and the south end and put it on trucks and distribute it to the supermarkets or anybody who can sell it. So we'll be looking for Coffee Cup Bakery.
With a K, right?
New products, I guess, yeah. Hope they're very successful. I don't mind having a muffin.
Welcome to Woburn.
Yeah. Council begins process for search for new auditor. These are always interesting times. Jerry Surratt's been there since 75, something like that. He's been there a long time. Did an admirable job, I would think, over the years.
And Jerry's son, Tommy, was literally the first kid I met at the Boys and Girls Club.
Really?
That I can identify. Yep.
And he stayed there all those years? Did he stay around there all that time? Yep. I think the Boys Club's a great spot.
I think Tommy beat
Unbelievable.
me in my game of bumper pool with him, I think.
Really?
I could be wrong, but I think
Yeah.
he beat me. He was pretty good.
Well, in their search for a new auditor, we always have, in Woburn, we have go around and we have a nationalized search, and then we open a closet door and there's a guy standing there and we say, there he is, right there, there's our new guy. But they'll go through the proper procedures because we can't do, it's harder to do now than it was years ago because we have a new, we have the same human resources lady, but I think like in purchasing and places like that, there's new people that come from other places, so we're kind of used to that now. So maybe they will have a good search. But Charlie Dory would be a good candidate. I'm not saying that because he has a background in finance. I think he worked for Fidelity.
He did it one
One
time, yeah,
time.
up in our
And,
Boston Merrimack offices.
And then he went, I don't know if he got laid off. I don't know how that worked. But anyway, he left Fidelity, went to work for the city. So I'm sure he took a pay cut. But maybe the pay cut was in lieu of sitting in the chair watching Jerry Surratt for a couple of years. But if you're interested in, you probably have to have a degree in accounting, maybe CPA or something. Put your application in. Search for a new auditor. The senior center is looking for donations of computers. But I don't know how that works. I think everybody probably got an old computer. Probably got one or two home that probably have viruses in them, so we shut them down.
I think I remember reading that article. They had a certain standard in terms of the system it had and
Yeah.
and how old it might be and whether it
That's the
functions or
same
not.
thing as saying, donate your car to the Boys Club, but make sure it's running so I can get a ride home. You know?
Correct. That's right.
They don't want any junks that they have to put tires on.
That's right.
No, that's right. Okay. So, okay, the city council questions the snowplow waivers. There's three guys that have been working for the city for a long time, and they have pickup trucks with plows on them, and they plow snow for the city. And that causes some people to get up in arms about conflict of interest. And you know, I suppose it could, but if the people who are watching people plow snow, it's not a very job everybody wants to do, plowing snow. It only snows in the middle of the night. You have to get up in the middle of the night, put the plow on, go plowing. But they work for the city, so now they're getting paid for plowing snow as contractors, so that has to be straightened out. So they'll do something about it, I think. I don't think you want to lose employees, and you don't want employees of the city to get themselves in a jam while working for the city. But you can't take a day off and plow snow. That's not right.
I was about to say, was the issue a conflict of interest, or was
Yeah,
there disclosure
that's-
forms that needed to
Yeah,
be
there's
filled
all
out?
kinds of problems, yeah. But they used to have a waiver thing, and I don't know how that worked, but they used to say it's okay. As long as everybody knew, I guess it was
As long
all
as
right.
it's disclosed,
Yeah.
that would make sense at the very least.
Comcast gets okay to park vehicles in East Woburn. I don't know how many vehicles Comcast has, but they're gonna park over by BJ's. Forbes Road is the road, when you're going to BJ's, it's off to the right where the hotel, you go up that road where the hotel is, and that's probably, there's 3 or 4 parking lots and it's kind of separated from the hotel. But they belong to the hotel, so they're gonna rent space from there. But somebody's already parking cars there already, so. I guess that's a problem. In the old days, they used to do a lot of stuff by consignment. You know, they'd ship a few cars in, and then you'd have them on consignment, so you didn't really care. You either sold them or they sat. Now you gotta buy them.
Interesting, okay.
So they got a lot of cars. Every dealer, Cadillac, all of them, Landon, they got cars parked all over the place. Over there, the Jeep dealer used to be down the south. They keep moving. And it's, of course, as soon as somebody comes and buys a building and occupies the building, they say, gotta get your stuff out. So, I mean, it's a problem for car dealers.
So Comcast has an office, or they had one in Winchester. I
Yep.
think they have a retail or customer service location in Wilmington, and I think
Yeah, they
one
have
of
a
the larger
customer
ones is
service.
Reading or North Reading, I
Yeah.
think. They have a
And then the
service
council
there.
gets into making them register all in Woburn because they want this excise tax and all that. That's a lot of baloney too. Okay, downtown sign program. The Woburn Redevelopment Authority and Mr. Queenan They get 3 more stores signed up for the sign situation where you get 3 if you want to have, get somebody to design a sign. There's a few things that have to be taken care of. The sign has to be a certain size. It has to meet a lot of demands. And then if you can get the sign done for $3,000, they'll give you up to $3,000. And if it costs 4, they'll give you 3. You got to pay the 1. So they're trying to get the signs downtown up to snuff a little bit, and they're doing very well at it. We've had sign committees over the years, as I remember, but it's a very unpopular place to be. To knock on somebody's door, come in and say, "I'm from the sign board. We're going to make you get a new sign." The guy said, "Get off my property." You know what I mean? So that didn't work. But it's not a very popular place. But since he gave it to the mayor gave it to the redevelopment authority to handle, they must have a different attitude as far as it's concerned. So they've done, I think they've done maybe 10 signs, all right. The dollar store needs a sign. It needs a sign. It just looks like
Is the sign or is the paint behind the sign?
Just a big white sign. It says dollar store. I like it, it should say the
I think the back behind it needs a coat of paint, if I recall.
There's something wrong there. They'll probably call me up tomorrow and say, "Mind your business." I'll take a picture of it.
Oh, my boys, though, were talking about the restaurants downtown and the variety that they have to choose from now as opposed to even years ago where
that's right.
There wasn't as much variety.
It's all changed. All that stuff.
Some great. Well, I mean, I don't need to tell you. You know all about some of the gems downtown. So,
Hobson Avenue. Anybody knows where Hobson Avenue is? Pat yourself on the back. It's off of Olympia Avenue, right near Washington Street, and this is another place that they're having a problem with a house, I guess, over there. But that hearing's been continued. So don't go down there tonight looking to have something about Hobson Avenue because it's been continued.
So is that tucked behind Cummings Properties over there?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's 3 or 4 little streets just before you get to Washington Street. Wainwright, there's a couple others there. Maybe they go 90 degrees off of Olympia Avenue, and Hobson Street is one of them. So there must be some problem over the alderman must be having. All right, so that takes care of our regular order of business. Ms. Gatta. Why don't we watch the weather, whichever one. Sports first, maybe. All right?
Hello, folks, and welcome once again to Sports. As always, I'm your host, Ray Newcomb, and today we will be looking at various topics from around the world of sports. In NHL news, the Flyers blanked the Kings on Saturday by means of a 2-0 victory. Some highlights of the game included Wayne Simmons scoring his 100th career goal and Steve Mason achieving his 2nd shutout in 3 games. Elsewhere in the league, the Bruins were also able to pull off a shutout against the Oilers by means of a 4-0 victory. In NBA news, the Celtics were victorious in their game against the Orlando Magic. This win can be greatly attributed to Rajon Rondo, who scored 19 points and racked up 10 assists during the 96-89 Celtics win. Sunday night was one of the biggest nights in sports as the Seattle Seahawks met the Denver Broncos in the Meadowlands to enact an epic competition of strength, skill, and determination that was Super Bowl 48. The Seahawks capitalized on the Broncos' jitters throughout the first half to bring the score to 22-0 in Seattle's favor. The second half began with hopes that the Broncos may return to pull off a fight. But to no avail, as Seahawks were more than doubled their score to 48, while the Broncos were able to rack up a measly 8 points. The Seahawks walked away with their first ever Super Bowl win and proved that there was no competition. Well, that's all for today, folks. For sports, I'm Ray Newcomb. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of the show.
All right, Rand, nice job. Very good. Rand Newcomb, sports editor for the Woburn Public Media Center. All right, here we are with the weather. We got 36 degrees today. Let's see, 34. Now, if you were watching Channel 4, they'd give you 35 minutes of weather pointing at all this stuff saying, look at that, see that cloud on Tuesday? I don't know about that one. Then those little snow on Wednesday. I'm not happy with the 11 degrees at night. I live in an old house and the wind blows right through there, boy, I want to tell you. 29 degrees. But maybe by the weekend it'll get a little better. I don't know.
They're saying Sunday.
Not
it
a
could
good
be-
there. Not a good week in February. We'll scratch that one. Next week we want our sun. I want San Diego weather. Next week we'll have the sign up. Thank you very much.
So you do it all, Ed.
We do it all.
You're like the Don Kent of Woburn Public
Well,
Media. Then.
Yeah, we are. I could stand up there. I told him we get a
The
green
green screen?
We could put the. See how nice. Look at the picture now. It's nice and
warm
warm
light.
here. We got. I know it. They do some wonderful things on there. These kids with all that electronic equipment.
So you had rain in the weather.
Yeah,
You had rain in the weather. Okay.
we're all set. We're all set. Rick, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so everybody out there that watches this program knows who you are. Chairman of the school committee, just finishing his 2 years and after being elected for 4.
Correct.
First time out the gate. That's pretty impressive. I'll have to say that, you know. But I said he knows every kid that ever went through the boys club, so that you get them out there and say, vote for me. You got to win. You know what I mean? How many years were you there?
I was with the club from 1989 till about 4 years ago. So yeah, a little over 20 years in Boys and Girls Club
20
work.
years.
Yeah.
You knew every kid by name. You always claimed that.
I certainly tried. I can tell you, I was in the program operations. I certainly did.
Really, huh?
Yeah, yeah. As executive director, it was a little bit more of a challenge because I was more in the office and more outside the
Trying to
building.
get
But
begging,
certainly tried
begging. You
to.
had to be a beggar, don't you?
A little bit, yeah. Well, you're not begging. You're just giving people an opportunity to invest in the kids at Woburn.
One
So
time-
in that way, it was.
One time I worked for the city I for a short period of time. I worked in the Board of Health, and I went to the Board of Health director, his name was Eddie Yap. And we got a thing from the state or something, said, got to go to the Boys Club and to the YMCA, and you got to see what kind of medical situation they got there. So we go over to the Y.
So what era was this?
This is
Around when?
since 1960s and 70s,
Okay.
maybe,
Okay.
way back.
Yep.
So the Y was probably just built. Nice brand new building. So we go over there and they open up a suitcase and it had, you could operate on somebody with all the stuff that was in there. So we made a note and he talked to the guy, interviewed the guy, talked to him, okay. So off we go up to the Boys Club. Charlie Gardner was there. Because he was the first guy. I think he must have been the first
He
one.
was the second director, but he's the one that.
He stayed there all the time.
He was from
there the
66 to
longest
92.
guy.
He hired me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we go up there. Charlie, you got a medical situation, okay, Band-Aids, cuts, whatever the kids you hurt or something. Oh yeah, he reaches under there. He got a brown bag full of a couple of Band-Aids, and it's like, geez, I say, you know, it's just too bad. Always a money problem, always. That was not the top of the list for the money problem.
It
But
was always a challenge back
they
then.
did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was a wonderful guy. I had a father-in-law who had Parkinson's disease. And he was an old Woburnite. And he went up there to the Boys Club and he asked Charlie if he could get in there in the morning before it opened and just walk around the outside of the pool. Not even in the water, just around the outside. So he did it in the gym, and he did that for a while. Finally, get in the water, and he walked around and around. And it kept his mobility 5 years ahead. You know, instead of being crippled up with that disease, it was terrible. But that's how he was. He was a good guy. But anyway, we don't want to talk about that. We want to talk about you.
Charlie was a great man. He was.
Charlie was a good man.
He was an inspiration. He was Mr. G, Mr. Gardner, man with the Gardner grip, grab you by the elbow, and all the stories. I think, you know, the history of the club will be written this year again with the 50th anniversary. But, you know, I look at Charlie Gardner and Glenn Sterling, and those are two gentlemen that put, I think it was 56 years between them into that operation.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
You know, really they sustained it and created a foundation for what you have today.
People who join and get involved in the Boys Club, like you know, there's a certain percentage. It even works here. Some of the kids that come in here when they're freshmen and they stay for 4 years, they learn how to run this equipment, and then they graduate. They come back. They come back. You know, they want us to stay involved. They want to just be there, part of the Boys Club. You know.
You know, I think the incoming president, who literally last Monday night got installed, is Sean Briere, who's a club kid. He was a kid who he and I and a whole group of his friends played basketball on Friday nights, and Now it's come full circle. He's a successful attorney practicing here in Woburn, and now he's the president. And that's the way I think it should be, where you know, the next generation comes back and gives back.
Yeah.
And I think Sean's been a great exemplar of that. And there's been others through the years as well. You know, you think of some of the families, the Ryans, the McElhaney's, the Boyles, et cetera, who you've had the Mars, multiple generations
Yeah.
of leaders within the club.
They have. It's really something. There's always been a problem with the building from the minute it was built. You know what I mean? It made of wood, you know, and then all the humidity in
Yep.
there and all that kind of stuff.
In '64, it was built with pine cathedral ceiling.
Yeah.
And I can tell you they probably didn't overinvest in ventilation back then.
No.
And in the late 70s, those pine timbers, you know, roughly 14, 15 years old, gave. Ironically, though, what happened was you lost the pool for about 18 months.
Yep.
But in talking with Charlie Gardner and Glenn Sterling, as it turns out, without the expenses of the pool, it allowed the club to regroup a little bit
Big money.
and
That's
catch
right,
up.
too.
So ironically, it ended up working out in a strange way. But
Because there was, if in those days, I'm going to go back to, you know, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, whenever the place was built and get going, there was always a problem, you know, whether it was the furnace to heat the water or the furnace to heat the building. Or
I
was
joke,
always
my
a
first
problem.
day, my first week on the job was July of 1999. And I just turned 33 years old. And I was the executive director. My first week on the job, bingo, which was a third of our revenue,
Yep.
it was the worst bingo night ever, my first night on the job for bingo. And the pool water heater died midweek. And on Friday, the sign on Main Street collapsed due to termites. So that was week one. And you know, either because I was, you know, crazy or committed, or maybe both. I came back for week two and stayed around a little bit afterwards. So
Imagine, huh? Yeah, you had a great run there. People just, everybody knows you. You spent the time there, but I mean, everybody knows you, and they don't have one bad word to say. They say that guy was a great guy. You know, we talk about Charlie Gunner. We're just lucky as far as having directors over there that knew their business and knew the children. It's knowing the children. That's what it is, and knowing how to deal with them. You know what I mean? I would have killed them all. You know what I mean? Because I mean, you go in there and you look at the pool balls. Everyone got a chip in it. You know what I mean? Everything has got a scratch on it. Or, you know, you say, geez, they're just so rough with the equipment.
you just pick that one. You know, if you're sitting in that office or at the front desk, and if you've been there long enough, you can pick that one sound that isn't like the other sounds above that cacophony that fills that games room, and you pick it out. I mean, we're lucky. Charlie Gardner was from Connecticut, so he, like me, were carpetbaggers.
Yeah.
Came from outside, and Glenn Sterling was a Woburn High grad, class of '69, I think.
Yeah, he's
so
a long
so
time
Sterling
ago,
was a Woburnite. As far, yeah, I think he was born outside of Woburn, but raised on the west side, and certainly had his
very
Tanner
good.
credentials.
So how would you, let's see, I don't say define, but I suppose you have to say, how would you say your first couple of years on the school committee went? Because I mean, the first couple of months you got to sit quietly because you don't want to say, you know, you got to learn who's running the show here. And then you get involved with a committee, and then you just go along. I suppose it's the same as the city council. I don't know as much about the school committee as I do the city council. In fact, I make fun of the school committee more because all I can get them to say is, I say, what do you do? What do you do? They say, we set policy. I said, oh, that's strange, you know, set policy, come on, you know what I mean? And I think it's because of my knowledge of before the reform.
Before
The school
1993,
committees
it
used
was
to
very
be able
different.
to say, this is how we're going to do it. There was nobody who was going to check on them at all.
You had
Now you're down there submitting the budget to the mayor saying, I hope he takes it. You know what I mean? Come on, that's not right either. But that's the way it is right now in 2014. So how do you think the first year went? Did you just get educated?
It's absolutely. I think, you know, the first 2 years it's been a learning process for me to understand the issues in greater depth, understanding the people involved, on the committee, the administration as well. And I think I was fortunate that I knew folks going in. At least it wasn't a personal introduction, but understanding how the committee works, how each one of us has their own unique perspective and roles, and gaining an appreciation for kind of the cadence of how a meeting goes. Understanding how the calendar comes into play, the budget, et cetera, in trying to determine that where can I make a unique contribution to the work of this group as a whole. This work for me isn't, people go, what will you do beyond school committee? And this, I'm not a politician by trade.
Oh, you mean as far as graduating up the...
And people ask me that, and I said that's not what motivated me to do this.
We'll start a rumor. Dwyer's going to run against you, Dwyer.
Very happy with my day job, but it's for me. It's to serve in a capacity in which I think I have some experience, have some perspective, having worked with kids for 20 plus years, having 3 kids of my own, being married to a school teacher. Having had my own educational background, kind of unique blend between public and private schools as well, and also my day job working in education still in a way
right,
too.
that's good,
So the thought process was, I've served Woburn in one capacity, offer myself up in another. If the citizens of Woburn believe that what I have to offer works, great. If they don't, 2 years from now, so be it. There'll be other ways for me to contribute to this community, and I will, regardless of what happens, in future elections or whatnot. So,
because everybody knows the same. Everybody has the same ideas, and the older you get, the more you appreciate it. The person standing, and my wife's a school teacher too. Mm-hmm. She taught at Northeastern University, but it's the same thing. The person standing in front of the group is the person. That's the person. That's the main person. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know how many teachers we have in the system, a couple of hundred probably, right?
At least, yeah.
So, and then the only ones I'm really familiar with now, because my grandchildren are coming through this school. So, how do you determine a good teacher or a bad teacher? You know what I mean? This stuff changes all the time, and that's one of the reasons I thought it might be interesting to discuss it, because you're at least old enough to know. Remember modern math? They change.
The new math.
The new math.
The new math, yes.
So you say, geez, 2 and 2 is 4. I don't know why they keep changing. It's easier to learn that way, or for some other reason. And it's the same thing with Dr. Reese and some of these things the Department of Education sends out to the community that says you're going to have to do. So if you looked at the building committee, there's a redundancy there, boy. You know what I mean? You get Paul Meany used to say, get our ducks in a row, get our ducks in a row. Because as soon as this school, is built, we're starting over here. Now, before you can even start, they'll say, well, you got to hire a janitor. You got to have an architect. You got to have a person who's going to supervise the job. All that stuff, and the school's still 5 years away from being built. So you all the time planning. Yep. And that's the way it's got to be, I guess. It
absolutely is. I think you touched on a couple pieces there, Ed. I think one of the mantras of one of my predecessors, Dennis Russell. Who I had the good fortune of following as chair. One of Dennis's mantras was, about unfunded state mandates.
Yep.
And I think whether it be the budget impact of unfunded or underfunded state mandates, or what tends to be the target it changes, and the method by which we're doing evaluations, the methods by which we're assessing student achievement, the methods by which we're holding ourselves accountable and folks in the school system accountable, they change significantly. And even just in a couple of years, I've seen how once you think you have, all the policies and people and training and people all lined up to make a measurable difference, then it becomes something else that you're aiming for.
Yeah, that's right.
And I know that that's been a challenge. I know that for this year, Mark Donovan, the superintendent, has had a goal to implement the new evaluation system. So, and that cascades down. We evaluate Mark evaluates administrators, and then you have the evaluation of teachers as well. But it's notable to me that, coming now from the private sector, how remarkably flat school systems are. And Woburn is not over-administered, to be honest, and compared to other districts, we definitely aren't. But when you look at, a principal and then all the teachers,
Yeah.
that's a really flat
That's a
chain
big
of
thing,
command.
that's right.
And even where I am in the private sector, there's, the supervision is regular. I joke with my wife,
Yeah.
I say, I have a weekly or bi-weekly one-on-one with my supervisor, and he lets me know how I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it's, very frank, honest discussion of what I'm doing well and what I need to improve on. And it's sometimes you can't sit afterwards as a result of those one-on-ones,
Yeah.
but I get that regular feedback. Whereas in her case, it's certainly not a weekly or bi-weekly basis where, it all cascades down. It just doesn't exist like that.
Yeah.
So I know Mark has a priority to make sure that the evaluation system can be done and done well with integrity. And that is a little, it's a state mandate, so there's a box we need to check. And to make sure you're doing so and not that's, going through the motions, but it's done well. Because to your point, the woman or man in the classroom, that's the point of service delivery. That's the place of real impact.
That's right.
And we have to make sure that those folks feel supported, that they have opportunities to grow, to learn, to be trained, to be developed and build a career, and hopefully build a career within our school system. And that's where the difference gets made.
Do you think that the superintendent, I should ask him actually, but I mean, do you think the superintendent, when the law was changed, the principal, Joe Finnegan, I hate to say that, Mr. Finnegan, he runs the school. He's in charge of the school. So the superintendent is going to get into the school, got to go through him, and he makes him in charge of the school. So I mean, that's the breakdown. So it's like it's more of an army type of deal. The general, the majors, are all the way down the line, and I suppose the custodians would be down, the privates down the bottom of the thing, picking up all the mess. But I mean,
don't underestimate the folks that provide
that's right.
supports.
That's right. But I mean, when those things change, it just gets everybody in a big dither, and they change too quickly. I don't think they should change. Administratively, I don't care what they do. But as far as the teaching is concerned, I think they should stay with the program long enough to see the results. Because you're never going to get anybody to believe that they don't teach to the test. That's another deal. Because then when the report comes out and it's in the Times, and Woburn, Winchester, and whoever, these other communities, they're all at 98.3 percentile of whatever they're supposed
Well, depending on what measures you're using. Yeah.
So nobody is 72. They're all at 98 or 97, right at the top. You can't, to get improvement, it's very, very difficult. So I don't see why would they keep changing the method of teaching. Like Dr. Reese, he's got to come in here and set up his own system. He could put, they should let him try something, do something and then educate the children, see what happens. But they never stay with the program long enough to let it sink in, and maybe, I don't know how long that would take. He probably would have to answer that too, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think part of it is the federal mandates, the state mandates as well. It makes it difficult to stay on track and to keep that long-term focus.
Is there such a thing as, let's see now, how I say this, is there such a thing as, I lost my point of view. Well, anyway, forget that. I was going to say, it's just like, you remember when you were in elementary school how it was.
Yeah.
It was good.
I did my Iowa tests.
Yeah,
I filled in those dot patterns. Yep.
Yeah, it was
Yep.
good. You might have been taught a little penmanship even, you know.
I was. I'm not sure how successfully that
So
took, but I was taught it.
I think it's things like that, people wonder why they change all that stuff. You know what I mean? Nobody knows how to write anymore. Nobody writes letters. Nobody does this. There's a lot of things people don't do anymore that I think they learned in the schools that you don't have to because you got a computer. You don't even have to spell, just push the button. You get a spell check and it takes care of the whole thing, basically. So some of that is good in one way, but then on the other way you say, well, maybe you should know how to write, so just in case there's no computer, somebody hands you a piece of paper and says, write something out here, I don't know.
Oh, I think, you asked, one of the things you learn from 2 years is that there's all kinds of data out there on accountability measures and various indicators and whatnot. I think what's difficult sometimes is to be able to ensure that the data you're given, does it actually tell you anything or not? Does it
Yeah.
give you a false sense of precision in some
Yeah.
cases? I think it's fair to say that some of the big trends I see is that we need to be doing a better job on the science and math piece. I think at all levels, but particularly the middle school. I think that there's enough evidence over a couple years, and when you look at a couple different perspectives and dimensions to it, that I think we can say we need to be doing a better job of that. Now, having said that, my own son will be graduating from the school, Woburn High, in the spring, and he got into Worcester Polytech.
Nice.
So, but that's anecdotal. That's one couple kids that I know are in the class. So, but I think by and large the science and technology pieces, the math pieces, we could do a better job on. And I know that Dr. Reese and Mr. Donovan, the principals are aware of that and trying to set new curriculum in place that could to make an impact on that. But
Is that because the big companies are complaining they can't find the people they want and that kind of stuff?
I don't think it's direct, but it's indirect, certainly. I mean, I see it in where I work that if you have technology skills, that you will get you'll have a strong career path. And I think even if you looked back over the time, I just read an article in The Economist this morning that technology and education and jobs always are aligned in some sort of race with one another.
Right.
And I just want to make sure that our kids, that when those technological leaps happen, and they will, that our kids aren't going to fall behind, that they have an opportunity to get
What
the
year
education.
did you graduate from
jobs.
high school?
Graduated from high school in 1984.
84. So now
Had no computer
you
requirement.
had to learn United States history from Columbus hitting the shores up until
Ronald
1984,
Reagan.
and then they threw you out the door. When I was there, it was only after the Korean War. So now the kids go further and further. United States history must be a flash in the pan. So does that mean that we have to go to school longer? Do those things mean that we have to educate the kids longer?
Either longer school day or longer
Because
school year.
they don't have enough time to get any depth on them.
Yeah, when you look at it
subject.
globally, in terms of industrialized countries, we tend to have shorter school days and shorter school years. Not convinced that the trade-off is going to mean that we have to do that, but there's a fair amount of compelling evidence suggesting that if you want to compete against Western Europe, if you want to compete against Japan and China, et cetera, that may be a way to go. I think one of the things that's interesting though to me is that there are objectively there are measures of global tests, and it shows the United States is still lagging in some respects in some of those critical tests and measures. By the same token, in terms of our economy and our creativity and our productivity, we're still a worldwide leader. So it's an interesting disconnect for me that, those tests, that tells me that those tests aren't measuring everything that you need.
That's
And
right.
it's something I just keep in the back of my mind as like I say, I think I hold myself accountable as a school committee chair and a member, hold myself accountable as a parent for my kids and the kids of this community's education. By the same token, I want to make sure that what we're measuring is real and meaningful, and that we don't get too hung up. There's a lot of white noise, and I was mentioning there's a lot of white noise of data, and wanting to make sure that we can focus on that which matters.
Do you like, even when you're just on a school committee, when you do things like early childhood education? Now that's coming down the road. I don't know where they're going to get the money, but that's coming down the road. That'll be an unfunded mandate. See, the federal government's going to say, look, we're going to start educating these children because you read every day somewhere in the paper that if a child gets into school, 3-4 years old in some kind of a situation, by the time they get to regular school, they already know count and colors. When I went to school in the first grade, I couldn't count or do any of that stuff. I remember Mrs. Doherty say, "What can you count to 10?" No, it's something maybe I might be able to. But now the kids, my grandsons, they go to school. They know their name, address, telephone number, where they live. They can know all the colors. They can count to 10. They do all that stuff. They're way ahead. So if you don't keep them busy and active in their head, they're just going to get daydreaming off, you know what I mean? And that's what happens, I think.
It's a great question in terms of if we do go down that route, and there's a lot of evidence indicating that pre-K education is making a real difference, is a real game changer. And my wife is a preschool teacher in an integrated classroom at the Shamrock School, so I see the progress that those kids make through her
Yeah.
each and every day. So I think that there's no question about whether or not the investment can yield returns. I think the question becomes, how do you do that in a sustainable way, economically, and in terms of a budget? I mean, last year, if we were to maintain the same levels of programs and services, it would have required almost a 6% increase in the budget. That wasn't going to happen. The reality was that this municipality didn't have a 6% capability to increase it. So we ended up going around 4.2% ultimately. And which was, when you compared to other city departments, a 4+% increase was a significant one, a healthy one.
Yep.
But it was nonetheless, we had to cut still to do that. So, my concern is, where are the dollars going to come from if the federal government mandates it, the state mandates it? How's that going to work? I don't think we can do that with our current revenue base. So the question is, how do you do that? How do you make that case?
No. I think the case will be made by osmosis will make the case, because I say this to me. I have an opportunity to go to the mayor's office with the camera and the crew, and we talk to him 2 or 3 times a year, basically around budget time, and he gives you a little bit of information. He gives you too much, but it's not a sustainable system. We're on I said, Scott, if you looked at his record, he's kept the budget down as low. He's always hammering Donovan. Get back there and redo the numbers over again. We're looking at this number. In the meantime, his budget goes up, because personnel is where the money is, and then they're getting raises and blah, blah, blah. So the budget goes up. If he holds the line, everything he can do, the budget still goes up. So if he come into office, say, at $100 million, and say he's into maybe 120 now, and somewhere in that area. And so if you say in 4 or 6 years it's gone up $20 million, well, when we get out here, you can't sustain that. I don't know where you're going to get it either has to be the federal government changes to some kind of a sales tax or something to just get.
And I know I've had conversations with members of the city council and the mayor. There's 2 probably items, I think, more from the municipal side. The healthcare cost is something that they're going to be looking at and seeing, is there a way you can maintain a strong health plan, health insurance plan, strong benefit plans for employees, while trying to mitigate some of the upside costs. That's one thing. I know that the mayor is looking at that actively and looking for some different options. I think the other piece of our budget, and we're grappling with this, and we certainly don't have the answers to it, is special education costs have been increasing at a rate that's not sustainable in the long term. We went up about 15% last year, about 13% the year before. And
the term itself is too big a term. You can't swallow that term. Special education. What do you call them? Individual, what's it, IEP?
IEPs, yep.
Okay, IEPs. Mm-hmm. I wish my kids had an IEP, really, when they come through the system. For some reason or another, I think maybe every child that comes into this school, or may start in middle school, where they're starting to get away from the nice being in the middle school. You know what I mean? Being in the elementary school, geez, it's nice. Mrs. Johnson and they're very good, brings cookies, all that stuff. Then you move over.
Then child development kicks in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then you move over to the Joyce and say, holy mackerel. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure the young ones now have to move from there over to here. In the 9th grade, and they're just babies. You say, wow, this is the hormone capital of the city of Woburn right here. That's what I call it anyway. And so now you move these young kids in here, and these guys are like big shots. But I say that the term special education is too generic. It's too big, because you have a kid that has a special learning disability that, see, this is where you get in trouble. Which I probably could get in trouble anyway, but you have, to a parent who has a child with a disability, that's the most important thing in life. Okay, we agree.
Absolutely.
We agree that every child born in this country has a right to get an education.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now, how are we going to do it? You can't say that a child who has a severe learning disability that costs a city or town thousands of dollars compared to a child who is a little bit, what I might say, just slow and needs a little tutoring or something to get him through a math situation. And he's in a special ed class also maybe because his IEP says he's having trouble. So, you know, you can't say, as soon as you say something, all the parents who have children with disabilities are going to think you're attacking them, and that's not the case at all.
No, I'm looking at the economics of it. I think that, you know, that we have a kind and compassionate group of outstanding educators who provide kids who have a range of needs and diagnoses and with the supports and services they need to not only just survive, but ultimately to thrive as productive young adults in our community. And you know, it's not a, you know, the commitment is there and has been and will remain. I think it just provides budgetary impacts of a scope that we need to get our hands around a little bit more. And I think that, you know, we may end up having to look towards the Commonwealth. You know, the municipalities may have to look to the Commonwealth to figure out if there's a way we can work together on this. But it's difficult if there's any line item in your budget. Let's take the special needs piece out of it entirely because as you mentioned, there's dimensions to it, and I think we do try to be sensitive in discussing this. But if you have any one individual budget item, regardless of what it is, that goes up at double-digit rates over a sustained period of time, you can't do that indefinitely.
You can't do that. It's
so
impossible.
We just need to get a handle on that, and I think that you know, all of us who have some influence and say over this process are looking for different creative ways.
Unless you get a governor or something that's going to turn around and say we got to straighten this out because it's going to put us all into the bankruptcy. Because sooner or later, if this is the road we're on, we won't be able to hire any teachers for all the money is going over here because we're mandated to spend the money over here. That's the problem, you know. So it's just not a sustainable situation. What about, let's see now, you can't do that either, so we better not even say that. But I think the mayor of Newton, maybe, I'm gonna just take a guess, 10 years ago, he refused to pay. He said, no, I'm not gonna pay. This is an unfunded mandate. I got a budget here, I gotta take care of the kids in Newton and the ones with learning disabilities and blah, blah, blah. And he said, refused to pay. Well, they had him down in the Middlesex Superior Court in about 2 seconds, and the judge said, you gotta pay. So you can forget that. So everybody's gonna pay. The other part is, if you have a situation where you could save money, which that isn't gonna work either because there's not enough money to save. There's no money. There's no money.
You know, I think we've tried to do as much in terms of, you know, assessing the systems that we have in place where it makes sense. You know, more often than not, it makes sense to keep the kids in district. That is typically the most cost effective, but also, you know, you want to keep your child in your local community. I think it's a place where the budgetary common sense and what the parents would want for their child oftentimes intersect. Not every time, but oftentimes do.
The woman who runs that for you guys over there, and she's new, I think, the other woman
correct.
retired.
Yep.
I've never met her. And
Kim Lawrence is her
I didn't
name.
know the older woman that was there and retired, and I don't know this young woman there. But I think that she could probably get one of the most difficult jobs in the city to have because she has a fiduciary responsibility to the city as far as the money is concerned. She's trying to keep the parents happy by providing everything she can in a financial way to the child.
Wants to provide the services that each individual
that's on
child
the top
needs.
of a razor blade because you move this way, the city's yelling at you, you're spending too much money, and if you're not, the parents are going to have you in court. They're going to say, do something to say you're not providing the services my child needs, or you're just up against it all.
And I know firsthand that the people who are, you know, to your earlier point about, you know, the service delivery, that the teachers and paras and the support personnel, the specialists, et cetera, they go above and beyond to provide the kids the services they need. And like I say, there's kindness and compassion there. and they do their jobs and do them well.
You remember during the campaign, they came up to school, we weren't doing good, we got in the magazine, all that crap, got polls up. It's good, nice politics, but it just irritates people like you or people who are in the business. They're just saying, we reduce ourselves to this kind of talk, you know what I mean? That the city of Woburn has not got a good school system, you know? I had a daughter that graduated from here, and I can guarantee anybody in the city of Woburn that if you want to get an education, if you want to get an education in this building right here, you can.
Absolutely.
And if they have any downfall at all, they may let you slide if you're not up to snuff, because the teachers always gravitate to the kids who want to learn. I learned that in the high school myself, because if you want to learn, they'll take you over in the corner and teach you while everybody else do your homework or something. You know what I mean? That's how the system works sometimes. So I think that if you want to get an education here, you know, my daughter graduated very well, went to Syracuse University, doing very well, you know what I mean? So you can do it, you know
Absolutely.
what I mean? It's very, very, well, you got to just put your nose to the grindstone and do it, you know?
Yeah, I think we have to make sure that you know, like I say, two of my boys go here. One's a freshman, one's a senior, and the oldest is going to WPI. So I think that's you know, testimony number one. However, I would tell you that my two largest critics I live with, and my two boys.
Yeah.
They will tell me everything that they
Everything
perceive.
that's going on.
Yes, you know, if anything is you know, either substandard in their eyes or unjust or whatever the case may be from their perspective,
Right, yeah.
I hear about it.
Yeah.
And I think there's some places that I think we can improve. I know I've talked with Mr. Finnegan about our AP course offerings. I think we can be cost effective and have a more robust AP course offering as well to challenge some of those kids who have some academic talents. You know, I think that we have an opportunity wherever a child is on the full educational spectrum, whether a child who's going to be taking AP courses or a child who has significant needs. You know, I don't think we need to cherry pick any child or type of child in that spectrum. I think we can offer a full range of program services and continue to move them and move the system forward. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort and a commitment, but I think we can do it.
What about the ones that don't want to be here? What do you want to do with them?
Well, you know, to be honest, any kid today who chooses to drop out is really, you know, maybe it's hyperbole, but is committing economic suicide.
It is, yeah.
I think that's maybe a little overly dramatic, but I think that's, you know, that the stats will bear it
I
out.
don't think it's over
It's
dramatic. I don't think they believe it, though.
It's $1 million decision. Over the course of a lifetime, a high school dropout as opposed to a high school graduate, it's about $1 million. It's $1 million decision. Now, I understand that there are circumstances clearly where, you know, family circumstances, other circumstances, you know, dictate it, but I was very pleased to see that across the Commonwealth, and typically our stats mirror the Commonwealth, that the dropout rate is gone down fairly significantly the last several years, even in some municipalities that had some significant dropout issues like Lawrence and Holyoke and Springfield and others. So that was great news to see, because like I say, ultimately, if they have that high school diploma, think about that $1 million of income and how that, you know, that multiplier effect in cities and towns all around this Commonwealth. That's significant.
I just, you know, your two sons are here. You know, there's kids here that don't want to be here. So you say you can't get rid of them because you can't go home. Parents are working. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's all this circumstantial evidence. So now they come into the school, they don't want to be here, and they can disrupt the classroom. When I'm trying to get my daughter into Dartmouth, and this dope is over here causing trouble, then you got to go down and see Mr. Finnegan and all. It's just the same thing as what's happening 50 years ago or 100 years ago or whatever. You know, there's just some that don't want to be here. And I always say, let's just eliminate. Oh, geez, that's the last thing they want to do. You can't get anybody to say, get rid of them out. Just push them out the door. Because I can guarantee you, that message, they'd be back in 2 weeks. They'd be back. They'd be home for 2 weeks or be working in Walgreens, putting iodine on the shelves for minimum wage. They'd be back very quickly.
Yeah, I think you have kids who may not have that motivation, or maybe the support at home, or maybe there's other. One thing I learned at the club is that you never quite knew what any child brought when they crossed that threshold.
Yeah, that's right.
After school.
That's
so I do have that sensitivity to it, but on the other hand, we have some kids here at Woburn High just this year. The kids who founded the Club of Social Concern.
Yep.
The kids who are just stunningly talented artists and singers and musicians. Some kids who are really inspiring for what they've done. In their short time here at Woburn High, that are really they will transform this school and I think this community for generations to come. It's amazing when I see some of my son's friends and others, whether they're my son or not,
right.
but just how talented they are and how I'm particularly pleased with some of the seniors who see themselves as role models in a very intentional way.
We had a group do
very impressive in that.
We
regard.
had a group do little segments on all the clubs in this city. I think Jennifer Gatter out there, she was helped them along with all of it. And I think there's like 60 odd clubs.
It's unbelievable.
From all different varieties. Well, listen, we got to get out of here. But this has been great. We could be here till 10 o'clock
I appreciate it.
tonight,
That's
my boy.
that's
So you
a great
can come
time.
back
Thank you.
again once
Thank
the
you.
budget gets going.
Okay.
And you come back, and then when you're fighting with the mayor, we'll have more to talk about. See?
I'd like to think we're trying to be cooperative rather than confrontative.
Be confrontational. It's better. It's better for the people. They read it in the paper. They say, good, he's down there
I
fighting.
have to sell
for
some
us."
papers. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, it does sell papers. All you have to do is get your name out there and say, oh, yeah, Rick Meadows, he told that man to go jump in the river. He wants the money. He wants the money. Never mind.
You're going to get me in trouble now.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's the name of the game. That's the name of the game. But I learned one thing tonight.
What's that?
It's Fred or Rick.
It was, yes.
Yeah.
Frederick, given name is Frederick.
Frederick.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
don't know how many people don't know that.
The funny thing was, I was told that on the ballot, I had to go by my legal name, my registered name, which is Frederick. So I went back and forth. Do I put Rick on the signs or Frederick on the signs? I said, the heck with it. It's Rick.
Yeah, right.
So call me Rick, call me Fred, just don't call me late for dinner,
Late for
right?
dinner. All right. Very good. All right, now there was a good 45 minutes with the chairman of the Woburn School Committee, and he's just given out all his assignments to all his people, and Joe Demers is going to be negotiating all the new contracts.
Well, he'll be on resources. He'll be on the contract
And
as well
Mrs.,
as,
and I guess it's Ms. Corrali, because I just
Yeah,
talked
Ms.
about
Corrali,
the
yep.
two new members.
Yep.
And they're going to be hip deep, right? You
Absolutely.
shoved them right into the pile. to
two
get
great
going.
new additions. I mean, it's tough to follow. It's tough for me to follow Joe Crowley. It'll be tough for Joe and Ellen to follow Dennis, who I mentioned earlier, and Marguerite Masota. I mean, two really dedicated school committee people who really had the best interest of the kids at Woburn at heart at all times.
Again, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ed.
Next time.